Let me introduce the first speaker of today. It's John Brown from Team Cymru. Please help me welcome him on stage.
Test, test. Good morning. Oh, I know you guys are the ones that went in back late, so come on. Good morning. There we go. Okay, now I know you guys are alive. Bert says hello too. So hello. So some of you know Bert. There's another Bert from Ripe Days. Olaf's Bert, as we like to sometimes call him, from the secret working group. Oh, wait, it's secret. We don't know about that. This is Bert's younger cousin, also known as Bert, and he's starting to get out. He helps me with presentations from time to time. All right, well, let's see if I can make the clicker click. It does. Great. So our talk today is about why IXs matter for enterprises, their network security, network operations, etc. And this is a thing that I've been starting to talk more and more about is why should an enterprise organization care about an internet exchange point and peering? Some of these slides that I have here, we're going to go through quickly because I'm going to assume most of you know those. This is a slide deck that gets presented to a wide range of audience levels, folks that understand what peering in transit is, some folks that don't understand what peering in transit is. So some of those slides I'll go quick. Some of those slides we'll slow down and talk a little bit more in detail about. If you have a question, I'm personally okay with raising your hand, someone running a mic to you, shout out the question in the middle of the presentation, because that's when it's relevant, is at that point in the presentation. Or you can keep it until afterwards. I hopefully have enough time for some Q&A at the end. So without much ado, let's get going. I do a lot of different presentations. The classification of these slides is TLP clear. If you don't know what TLP or the traffic light protocol is, please go to first.org. They have a definition of what the TLP classifications mean. If you don't know what first.org is, FIRST stands for the Forum of Incident Responders and Security Teams. It's one of the oldest cybersecurity organizations on the planet. If you want to take pictures of these slides, feel free to take pictures. Try not to maybe take pictures of your colleagues. Some folks like it, some folks don't, but feel free to take pictures of the slides. The slide deck is available through whatever Netnod does, and if you want them from me, just shoot me an email. My contact info will be up here on the slides as well, and I'll be happy to share them with you. Quick agenda. We're going to talk about introduction, who am I rather, what's transit and peering, exchange points, why peer, and really I think the meat of the whole thing will be down here towards the bottom when we talk about net ops and security ops and why peering matters for enterprises. Brief summary about myself. I'm a CISSP. I'm also a commercial multi-engine pilot. I fly airplanes for fun and a little bit of money from time to time. It's another technical thing, and it's really interesting if you look at aviation and the procedures and the things we do through in aviation to allow you, the traveling public, to feel comfortable to get in a metal tube that goes hurtling through the sky 6 miles above the earth and not think twice about it. I think there's actually an application of many of the things that we do in commercial aviation, procedures and processes and practices that could very easily be applied to cybersecurity and network operations and network security to build a better network. I am an evangelist at Team Cymru. I'm a recovering ISP owner. I used to own an ISP for about 17 years. I sold that ISP, and now, thankfully, I help other service providers build a better mousetrap, as it were. Long time ago in a place far, far away, I used to help run en route DNS for ICANN. This was back in the early 2000s, so I pushed a few DNS packets as well. My contact info is available up there, jbrown plus netnod23 at cymru.com. Marketing makes me do this. I've got to put in the marketing slides. You know, who is Team Cymru? I will not bore you with a sales pitch. Effectively, we are a nearly 20-year-old company that does a lot of threat intelligence work and can tell you the who, what, where, when, and why of malicious activity that happens on the internet. We have a number of services that are available for ISPs, hosting companies, and what I would also say critical infrastructure providers that are no cost. They're free free as in free beer, which we all like, right? If we looked at the presentation that EuroIX did yesterday, right? One of the things up there, what could IXs do better? Offer free beer. Well, we have free services here for ISPs that do DDoS mitigation, bogon routing, which is probably one of our most famous known things, and then our Nimbus, our threat intelligence tools. So a little bit about those. We have a bunch of that stuff available on our website if you want to go look more about that or come to our stand. I'll be happy to chat more about our services there. If you are a CERT, we have a CERT program. We have more than 150 now global certs that are signed up where we do information sharing with those certs to help them in their regions understand what malicious activity is happening in those regions. We have 4 conferences per year. We have 3 of them, which is called RISE, the Regional Internet Security Events, and then we have our big conference every year, normally in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe. They are our host. It is a 3 to 5 day cybersecurity, invite only, no sales, no media, etc. If you're interested in attending one of these, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to make sure you get an invite to it. We do vet and make sure that we have people who actually can do things on the internet and make things go away that are bad and are not media or not sales folks, stuff like that. Another really big thing that I always found in the ISP business was our Dragon News Bites. This is a news feed of articles. Our folks read these articles, find the ones that are relevant, push them out in a daily email feed. I used to spend the first 15, 20 minutes of my morning with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee reading through relevant news articles. And the nice thing is our folks separate the reporters that don't know what they're talking about bluntly versus those articles that actually have some good meat to them. Anyway, so now I've made the marketing folks happy. Let's go on to reviewing. I'm going to assume that most everybody in this room knows about what peering is and what transit is. I have these slides to help, one, make sure we have a common talking point and a common language that we're all working from. You know, at the end of the day, transit, you're paying somebody to carry your packets to and from the rest of the internet. And that's their job to figure out how to get your packets, your requests to Netflix, to Google, to Facebook, etc. They have that responsibility. Generally, smaller ISPs purchase from larger ISPs. Larger ISPs generally have a default free zone where they are interconnecting and peering with the other big large ISPs around the world and are exchanging traffic. Enterprises typically will buy their connectivity from a transit provider. I'm hoping to try to start breaking that model to some extent. And that would also bring value to an IX in a region by having more of these enterprises that are really service providers part of the network. Peering, just to make sure we have a good common frame there, peering is really simple. It's me and Fergus exchanging our routes and our routing information so that I can send packets directly to his network, he can send packets directly to my network, and what have. And so the benefits of peering, as you mostly all know, is to improve the connectivity between those two networks. Reduce latency, reduce hop count, reduce failure modes, etc. The big key difference with peering is there's absolutely zero expectation that my peer is going to transit my packets or take my packets to the global internet. They're only going to take those packets into their network, and that's it. Peering uses the BGP protocol. We use that to exchange routing or to exchange signaling information about how packets should be routed across the network. BGP is a well-understood, well-known protocol that's been out there for what now, 30 years? 28 years? I forget when the original RFCs came out for it. But it's in the class of routing protocols called an EGP, or an exterior gateway protocol. Yeah, so basically you're going to build sessions between networks. And if you do that privately, you're going to have some scaling issues, right? This is where an IXP really comes into play. So an IX solves a scaling problem of everybody trying to build their own private links between networks. At some point, that does not scale very well. And so internet exchanges started showing up. I remember the first exchange I ever connected to, which was May West in the west coast of the United States, and we plugged in with a FDDI. Does anybody remember FDDI? Okay. I expected at least that amount of hands going up as going, oh my God, he's talking about FDDI. That is like ancient. Remember dual attached FDDI, right? Yeah, exactly, right. So May West was a FIDI network. This is all before we really started going down the final path of everything is Ethernet. Thank God everything is Ethernet, right? What's his name from 3Com is probably sitting back and going, oh my God, I created a monster from eons ago. But to connect and peering, you have to build private circuits. If you have dozens or hundreds of these, that's dozens or hundreds of cross connects and circuits that you have to buy. An internet exchange allows you to get rid of that problem by having a single connection up to the exchange fabric. Everybody else has a single connection to that exchange fabric. And now you allow the magic of OSI layer 2 and switching to help push traffic back and forth and build those TCP sessions amongst them. An IX generates value based on the number of participants. So the more service providers, the more the more carriers and telcos that are at an IX, the better the value. So part of what we're going to talk about here in a minute is where the value is also for enterprise networks and the ISP and telecom networks that connect to an exchange. So again, why peering? Reduce latency, improve customer experience, reduce network costs, improve reliability and resiliency. If 20% of your traffic is Netflix, have a link to Netflix, because now you're not having to pay the cost of that bandwidth. If you got packets that need to go to Malmo, there's no reason for them to go to London, right? They should just go straight down to the provider that's coming up from Malmo that's connecting into here, or maybe there's actually an exchange node in Malmo that they can connect to. Other words, let's keep in-region traffic in region. So how does peering work? You and your router establish a link. We set up a BGP session. We use autonomous system numbers, which are allocated by regional registries. Those routing information exchanges back and forth, and that traffic will not now go across your transit links. Again, the list of things that this improves. So, we all generally agree with how I characterize peering in transit? Anybody want to say, no, you're completely off base and wrong? All right, cool. Just want to make sure. I mean, you guys are a tough crowd. It's a technical crowd, so I got to make sure that, we're at least on the same page there. So why should enterprises peer? Well, first thing is that today, I think more and more folks are thinking this, is that the traditional enterprise is no longer just an enterprise. More and more, they are becoming a service provider. And one of the examples I like to use is banking. A bank today has their mobile app, their mobile device. Same with airlines. You're trying to get to that user data, your financial records, on that mobile device, and that mobile device is connected to a telecom mobile operator who is potentially connected to an internet exchange point. But then the banking infrastructure is going across some sort of transit connection. Some banks may be doing things up in the cloud with an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft or other similar kind of cloud. But they may also have their own infrastructure that ultimately needs to be communicated with, because that's where the banking records, your account records, are stored. But banks aren't the only kind of enterprises that should be connected to an exchange. Your local township, your city, your municipality, the schools, those are all typically enterprise organizations. But I would state that those folks should be connected to an internet exchange as well, because that brings value not only to the IX, but it also brings value to those enterprise organizations, right? If a school district can sit there and shove data, telelearning information back and forth across an IX and improve the quality of experience, especially as we're doing a lot more video and remote distance learning, we did a lot of that during COVID, et cetera, then having that kind of interconnectivity is better than just transit. The challenge is that most enterprise organizations look at buying their connectivity. Their networking department does the simple thing. Oh, we need to get connected to the internet. So what do? They go out and buy transit. They go connect to Telia. They go connect to Level 3 or to Zayo or to somebody, BT. Fill in the blank with your favorite transit provider there. And then they stop thinking about it because they've got their transit connection. But what happens if you have a DDoS? What happens if you have some sort of cybersecurity event? What happens, for example, when a very large American telecom a few years ago, right after Christmas, basically watched their entire optical transport network for the entire country in the US melt? And it took them a couple of days. And the whole optical transport network melted because there was a problem with their out-of-band networking infrastructure that sent the wrong commands and the wrong signals, and it started to flood and cascade, and that large carrier lost connectivity, and there was a multi-day nationwide outage. Well, I happened to, at that time, I was an ISP. I ran an ISP business, and our city government also had a connectivity with that multinational, national large carrier. Their circuit went down. Our circuit stayed up because we weren't tied to that network. And then in addition, because we were so heavily peered, we were able to provide just about all the services they needed, and they never really missed a beat. Now, if they were directly peered, they would have also continued to go on without much of a problem at all. Yep. So peering for service providers is great, but peering for enterprises is more of an issue, I think, and more valuable today. Why should we care about peering from a NetOps perspective? Brand enhancement. These are the marketing words that we need to use in convincing enterprises why they should care about peering. It's about brand protection. It's about brand enhancement. It's about customer experience. It's about network resiliency. It's about operational or OpEx cost reduction, right? Because bandwidth across a peering connection is typically cheaper than bandwidth across a transit connection. It allows you to redirect things on a transit world while you're investigating something via your transit links, but you still have 40, 60, 80% of your traffic coming across a peering environment, all right? At the end of the day, it's going to be a strategic decision that impacts your whole organization. Let's look at enterprises from a security perspective. Again, it's a brand enhancement, brand protection. Why do I use these words, brand protection, brand enhancement, customer experience? Because the challenge is we have to get into the boardroom. We have to get into the C-level, executive level, and help the CISO, help the CIO, help the CTO at these organizations understand why they care about peering. And the things that are going to help them understand that are things like brand protection, brand enhancement, right? If XYZ organization, oops, I just lost a lid. If XYZ organization comes out and says, hey, we are better because we are now peering at Netnod. We're peering in the Nordic region. We're able to interconnect. Life is good. And you're going to have a better experience. That can translate to better revenue on their balance sheets, whether it's new revenue or it's keeping revenue, right? Resiliency and reliability are also key reasons why enterprises, or the words we should be using with enterprises to help them connect and look at why an exchange is important. Let's look at an example, a DDoS attack. And I know I'm running a little bit quick here, so I'm going to go through this a little bit fast because I'd like to make sure we have some time for questions if there are any. So, teenagers suspected of crippling Dutch banks with DDoS. This was a few years ago. Yep, 2018. Yeah, 2018. The attacker purchased a stressor service for about 650 Swedish kroners per week, or roughly $50 to $60 per week, to DDoS a whole bunch of Dutch banks. These banks were impacted. They were crippled. These banks were not connected to an internet exchange. And all of the DDoS came across their transit links. Customers could not access their online banking apps. They're Dutch banks. There's a fairly moderate-sized internet exchange in the Netherlands, I think, called Amzix, right? It's like pretty dang on big. None of them at that time were connected to Amzix, nor could I find anything where they were using a different organization to be a proxy to connect them to Amzix. Had those banks been connected to Amzix, I postulate that they would have had a better customer service and better brand protection and network resiliency with their fellow Dutch in-country customers, because that traffic could have gone across the exchange point as opposed to going across their transit links. I think the DDoS impact would have been much less. So other examples, a fiber cut or your optical transport equipment melting down, right? All of your eggs are in one basket if you have a couple of transit providers. Even if you have 2 or 3 transit providers, one of the things you have to think about is, are those transit providers going into the same sheath on the same fiber cable that's in the ground? Because there's a lot of consortiums that will build fiber, and member A gets the first 12 strands, member B gets the second 12 strands, and member C gets the third 12 strands. Well, if the backhoe comes along and cuts that whole cable, I don't care if you've got transit from all 3 of those consortium members, your cable is physically broke, all 3 of them are impacted, right? If you're peering, you may be able to have a different level of inter or intra connectivity within your region that's taking a different optical path. Regional conflict. I think there's a couple of those things happening right now. Your country or region could be cut off for various reasons. A local IX in region can help keep connectivity running in that region. If you're an enterprise organization, having that connectivity also brings value to helping folks. Case in point, you're a government organization, right? And so the government organization allows you to be able to get to your local government because they're peering at the exchange point. So what should enterprises do? They should apply with regional registries to get an AS if they don't have one. They should go research peering DB and other similar tools to figure out where they should be peering in those regions and what exchange points they should be using. They should certainly attend a peering forum, something like a Netnod meeting or a EuroIX meeting or similar, right? Yep. They should get routing equipment that can actually handle the BGP sessions. They should get themselves registered in peering DB. What should IXs do? What should you guys do in the IX world? You should do more educational outreach to these enterprise organizations and help them learn and understand why peering is important. Invite them to come to a forum like this. Work with existing members in your exchange environment to identify, is there traffic flows that are going to these critical enterprise organizations, and can you then use that real data to help them understand where and why they should be peering? In other words, you're going to help them build an economic case as to why they should show up to the IX. And you should probably help them with RPKI, ROA. That might get some people throwing things at me. I don't know, but I think signing routes is not a bad idea. Security considerations. You need to make sure that your firewalls and your other IDS, IPS environment understands the difference between peering and transit and how those are interconnected. Make sure your regional registry route records are up to date. Make sure you have IIR records up to date. These are all things that enterprises don't know much about, but we have the opportunity to do education on. In most of my presentations, I have an ask. I ask the audience to do something. So here's the, excuse me, here's the ask for this presentation. Let's figure out how to work together to enhance the value of IXs by getting more critical infrastructure enterprise organizations to connect to your IX. Let's figure out how to do that, because that will make better value across the board for everybody. And with that, I'm done. And I stand for questions, comments, get the heck off the stage, whatever. Hello. Number 2, Mike.
Hello. That's better.
There we go.
Hi, James Rice from Networks. I've been peering at IXPs for about 25 years and running some for some of that as well. I'm curious, I've got 2 questions for you mostly. One is, what criteria do you use to determine whether or not your enterprise is suitable for peering at an IX? And the other one is, what do you tell your enterprise customer about the obligations when they're peering at IX? The reason I ask is because you mentioned a bunch of things like routing hijacks will probably become less severe. This only is true if your enterprise is doing things like per-peer prefix filtering, RPKI, et cetera, and what I find is that disproportionately the enterprises aren't doing that. They're expecting a service where they just plug in and forget. And they don't maintain sessions. Actually keeping sessions up with enterprises is disproportionately difficult. Last year I went over 50 customer prefixes, and then dozens of sessions went down. Mm-hmm. Even worse, several sessions then came back up a minute later, and then went down, and then came back up a minute later, and then went down, and came back up because they've got auto reset on their max prefixes. Email the ops list, get 1 or 2 sessions back up and running, ended up spending several days calling around all these enterprises. And they're set up where knockout goes nowhere, peering at goes nowhere. You call the 24/7 knock line, and you get through to customer service, and they're like, what's your customer details? And I'm like, I'm not a customer. And they're like, well, why are we speaking to you? They don't understand that they have to speak to people who aren't their customers. They're not geared for this. I've got a peer that I'm currently chasing because their IPv6 sessions have been flapping for 8 months now. And they're like, oh, maybe it's a problem on your end. I'm like, well, actually, I've replaced my peering router since then. And also, I noticed that all of your sessions to the root servers and the root collector are flapping as well. This is definitely a problem at your end. And they don't pick up on this. They don't monitor things. And is it really doing them a good service to say, come on, just peer it in IX, everything will be peachy, when actually what they need to do is take on the same responsibilities that their upstreams have been doing. So for instance, are they doing S-flow and looking at where DOS traffic's coming in? Are they able to put in layer 4 filters for DOS traffic themselves? So
I think you bring some very good points there. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to, first of all, is education, right? So a lot of these enterprise organizations don't have the technical skill sets to understand the value of why they need to build a better, more resilient network. And I think that we in the community have a great opportunity to take our wealth of knowledge and work at helping them learn how to do that and help build that. To the other question that you had at the beginning, which is, how do you make a determination as to what organization should or shouldn't come to an IX? I think for me, a lot of times I looked at my traffic flows and where am I talking to a lot? And those are the folks I should be peering with. And I think that an IX has the ability to look at traffic and understand where its members are trying to talk to and potentially work with members in their flows to identify, well, who should we bring into the exchange? What kind of organizations? And that's why I listed the, let's see if I can get back to it. The typical types of enterprises, banks, government, those are the ones that we should be talking to initially. Your local government, your schools, the bank, financial organizations, other organizations similar that have a fairly large impact into our community. It's not an easy problem. It's not going to be a simple problem, but I think if we tackle it, I think it'll build a more resilient network for all of us that are using it. I think there was a couple other. Yes, sir?
Hello. Hello. So I think the point you made about the Dutch bank was excellent, but I also think that their ISP did a bad job by not providing them a way to rate limit their traffic from outside the country. So even though you could solve it the way you proposed, ISPs should also have a way to protect their customers from that kind of international traffic to make sure that it works in country.
Sure.
So that's a point that everybody here can act on.
It's not just, there's not a this is certainly was not a single silver bullet that would have solved that problem, right?
But so per your point, I think the major tax authorities, the social security service and so on, those organizations are probably big enough to the point stated here previously that they can run it correctly. But I think the local school, I don't think that they're capable.
Depends on,
of
like in Albuquerque, we have a school district that manages close to 500 schools,
sure.
Right? And so go to the head of that, to the CIO of the school district, and that's where their connectivity focuses up to a point, and then push from there.
Yeah, sure. So, but if you're a big enough organization, you can run it, but
yeah.
You shouldn't recommend any small shop to run it, because you do have to.
I also think it's an opportunity for ISPs to partner with their customers and say, hey, we love that we're selling you transit. We want to keep doing that, but we also think you should peer. And there's an opportunity there. Any other questions or comments? One more behind, or two. There's one gentleman right over here and this gentleman, if we can.
So I'm working for an ISP, but a lot of these enterprises you're talking about, they have offices spread geographically all over the country. Mm-hmm. And they still need, and they're dependent on somebody having the infrastructure to connect them together.
Sure.
So your example, for instance, this fiber cut or optical network crash, if they can't reach the towns where the IX are located, then it doesn't matter if they're connected to the IX or to the that supplier is providing the internet. So why have the additional complexity? Why not just get it from the same provider that actually have the expertise and knowledge and such things? And of course, they should do good DDoS protection within the country and such things. But why add on when you, regardless, are dependent on those guys?
So I think, first of all, is that each enterprise organization is going to be an individual case and an analysis of their network, right? Part of it also, as I had mentioned, we have to look at when an enterprise is looking at their resiliency, they really need to go down to OSI layer 1, the physical layer, and are all of their providers in that same cable bundle, right? So if all of their providers are in that cable bundle, peering or no peering doesn't matter, because if the cable gets cut, you're done. So I encourage enterprises to start to dig into understanding how they're interconnected and where they are. And then if peering matters at a regional or a national level, they should take a look at that. Last question, gentlemen.
Hi. I understand that peering is important today, but I heard about that some customer peering with 2 different IX. Is that needed?
When I ran an ISP, I peered with probably a dozen IXs. And in many cases, depending on who you're peering with, you may have a requirement to peer geographically diverse and at different IXs for resiliency of that peering session. For example, to peer with Google, you've got to be at multiple places, which could be different IXs. You know, speaking from my experience in the US, that could be CoreSite at 1 Wilshire, and it could be Equinix, IBX at Ashburn on the East Coast. Now I've met that requirement, I'm diverse, and Google feels comfortable that their traffic will still get to my network from either of those locations. I peered with them in more places than that, but that's just a simple example. So peering at multiple IXs is a good thing. Okay. And I think with that, we are well out of time, but thank you for the indulgence of that. Hopefully this was a good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Jon, for a really interesting presentation.